The jar sitting on my counter contains something that has been alive for 847 years. Not preserved, not frozen, not dormant. Alive, breathing, feeding, growing. This sourdough starter was first mixed by a baker in medieval France during the reign of King Philip IV. It has survived the Black Death, 2 world wars, the Industrial Revolution, and the rise of Wonder Bread. It has never died, never needed replacement, never required a trip to any store. The same living culture that fed French peasants in 1176 just made my breakfast this morning. Meanwhile, the packet of commercial yeast in your pantry expires in 2 years and costs 3 every time you bake. A 3 every time you bake. A 47 billion industry convinced you that bread requires constant purchasing when medieval bakers proved it requires only patience. What you're looking at isn't just bread, it's freedom. A freedom that was systematically stripped from us over generations. Commercial yeast didn't just replace sourdough starter, it created dependency where independence once thrived. Every time that packet of Fleischmann's runs out, you return to the store. Every time it expires, you throw it away and buy more. The industry relies on this cycle, a perpetual revenue stream engineered into the most basic human food. Let's break down the revenue model. A packet of commercial yeast costs around $3, expires within 1 to 2 years, and most home bakers purchase 5 to 6 packets annually. That's nearly $1,000 over a lifetime for something medieval bakers got for free. Meanwhile, sourdough starters cost pennies in flour and water, never expire, and can be maintained indefinitely. The math reveals the conspiracy. This didn't happen by accident. Expiration dates weren't inherent to bread making, they were engineered into it. Prior to the 1860s, no one purchased yeast. The very concept would have seemed absurd to bakers who maintained living cultures passed through generations. But with industrialization came an opportunity to monetize a process that had always been free. The corporate takeover of bread transformed it from craft to commodity. What was once knowledge, passed from master to apprentice, became a product requiring constant repurchasing. The living, breathing culture in every medieval kitchen was replaced by sterile packets with barcode stickers and expiration dates, and we were told this was progress. Welcome to Forbidden Camping, where we uncover what the food industry buried. This is where we crack open the vaults that big food desperately locks shut. Today, we're opening the medieval bread vault, revealing techniques that fed humanity for millennia before being systematically erased from our collective knowledge. Ring the bell to never miss a single technique they tried to erase. Because what you're about to learn isn't just history, it's revolution in a jar. The evidence from medieval sourdough is overwhelming. Monastery records from the 9th through 13th centuries document specific sourdough cultures maintained across Europe. The Benedictine monks of Cluny Abbey recorded detailed feeding schedules for their starter dating back to 982 AD. These weren't recipes, they were maintenance logs for living organisms treated as sacred inheritance. When the Black Death decimated Europe in the 1340s, many communities were entirely wiped out. Yet their sourdough cultures survived, passed between the living as precious inheritance. The Bakers' Guild of Paris maintained detailed records showing specific starters surviving from 1176 through the plague years and beyond. These cultures weren't merely convenient, they were treasure. Medieval baker guilds protected their starters as trade secrets worth more than gold. Apprentices swore oaths to maintain the culture, with severe penalties for negligence resulting in a starter's death. Some guilds even practiced starter splitting, ensuring multiple bakers maintained portions of the same culture as insurance against disaster. When European settlers crossed to America in the 1600s, they didn't bring commercial yeast packets. They brought living cultures, often stored in small ceramic pots or dried on linen cloths. Archaeological digs at Jamestown and Plymouth have uncovered fermentation vessels with residue containing the same bacterial signatures found in traditional European sourdough. The physical evidence continues mounting. Excavations of medieval bakeries throughout Europe have uncovered specialized sourdough vessels, clay pots with specific dimensions, optimal for maintaining stable cultures. These aren't theoretical reconstructions, they're physical artifacts showing an unbroken tradition spanning over 1,000 years. Modern science hasn't debunked this ancient practice, it's validated it. Microbiome researchers at the University of California studied sourdough cultures maintained for over a century, confirming their viability and genetic stability. Their findings revealed something remarkable. These cultures represent one of the most stable microbial ecosystems known to science. The nutritional superiority of sourdough isn't folklore, it's documented in peer-reviewed research. Studies from Cornell University demonstrate that traditional sourdough fermentation neutralizes phytic acid, making minerals more bioavailable. The long fermentation process pre-digests gluten proteins, explaining why many gluten-sensitive individuals can tolerate true sourdough when commercial bread causes distress. Longevity studies on century-old starters reveal something commercial yeast companies don't want you to know. These cultures don't degrade over time. A starter from 1840 tested at Purdue University showed identical fermentation capability to newly created cultures. Unlike commercial products engineered for obsolescence, sourdough cultures demonstrate remarkable genetic stability. This stability comes from their unique biochemistry. The wild yeast and lactobacillus bacteria create a self-regulating ecosystem. The yeast produces carbon dioxide for leavening, while bacteria create lactic acid, which prevents harmful organisms from colonizing the culture. This symbiotic relationship creates a perfectly balanced environment requiring only flour and water to thrive indefinitely. What you're learning today is just one chamber in our complete food preservation vault. Ancient techniques the food industry buried go far beyond bread. Traditional fermentation methods for sauerkraut, kimchi, and other vegetables allowed our ancestors to preserve harvests for months without refrigeration. The medieval seed-saving techniques we cover in our preservation vault ensure you'll never buy seeds again. The natural food storage methods, using root cellars and clay vessels, maintained food freshness for months without electricity or chemicals. Everything is in the description. Scan the code on your screen to access the complete vault of knowledge they didn't want you to have. The systematic erasure of sourdough knowledge began in earnest with Fleischmann's Yeast in the 1860s. Their marketing campaigns didn't just promote commercial yeast. They actively portrayed traditional methods as primitive, unsanitary, and inconsistent. Advertisements depicted sourdough as the bread of poverty, while commercial yeast represented modernity and progress. The Wonder Bread campaign of the 1930s completed this transition. Their slogan, "Builds strong bodies 12 ways," implied nutritional superiority, while their production methods stripped bread of everything that made it nutritionally valuable. More importantly, their marketing positioned traditional bread making as unnecessarily laborious and outdated. Supermarket consolidation in the post-war era eliminated local bakeries that maintained traditional methods. Shelf-stable products took precedence over living foods, and bread transformed from a daily craft to a factory product with 2-week shelf life achieved through chemical preservatives. Regulatory capture ensured this transition. FDA standards were written to favor commercial production methods. The legal definition of bread evolved to accommodate additives, preservatives, and commercial yeast while creating hurdles for traditional fermentation. The system wasn't designed to improve bread, it was designed to commodify it. This transformation created a $47 billion market encompassing commercial yeast, bread additives, preservatives, and industrialized baking equipment. Every aspect engineered for dependency, an endless cycle of purchasing what our ancestors created for free. The science behind sourdough's remarkable longevity is straightforward but profound. Wild yeast, captured from the environment, combines with lactobacillus bacteria to create an ecosystem in perfect balance. The yeast consumes simple sugars and flour, producing carbon dioxide that leavens bread. The bacteria produce lactic and acetic acids, creating the distinctive sour flavor while preventing harmful bacteria from colonizing. This pH balance is critical. The acidic environment, typically pH 3.8 to 4.5, prevents harmful organisms while promoting beneficial ones. Commercial bread lacks this protection, requiring preservatives to prevent spoilage. The feeding cycle maintains this balance indefinitely. Fresh flour and water provide new food sources for the microorganisms. When properly maintained, the culture reaches a stable equilibrium where beneficial organisms dominate. Perhaps most remarkable is the temperature resilience. While commercial yeast dies at temperatures above 130 degrees Fahrenheit or below freezing, sourdough cultures can survive extreme conditions. Dried sourdough starters have been revived after decades of storage. Refrigerated cultures can hibernate for months. This resilience explains how these cultures survived through centuries without modern climate control. The symbiotic relationship between bacteria and yeast represents one of nature's most perfect partnerships, stable for millennia without human intervention beyond basic feeding. Creating your own medieval-style starter is surprisingly simple. Combine equal weights of whole grain flour and water in a glass jar. Leave it uncovered in a warm location for 24 hours, then discard half and feed with fresh flour and water. Repeat this process daily for 5 to 7 days until the mixture becomes vigorously bubbly and develops a pleasant sour aroma. The feeding schedule requires minimal effort, just 2 minutes daily. Discard all but a few tablespoons of starter, then add equal parts flour and water. At room temperature, feed daily. In the refrigerator, feed weekly. The cost is negligible. Pennies per feeding. Common failures are easily remedied. A starter that smells like acetone needs more frequent feeding. One that's too sour that needs warmer temperatures and more frequent refreshment. A starter that seems dead will often revive with regular feeding and patience. The bread making process requires no commercial yeast ever. Mix your starter with flour, water, and salt. Allow 4 to 6 hours for the first rise, shape, then another 2 to 3 hours before baking. The time investment is primarily waiting, not active work. For preservation, simply dry a thin layer of starter on parchment paper, then crumble the flakes into a jar. Alternatively, maintain a small amount in the refrigerator with monthly feedings. These methods have preserved cultures through wars, famines, and migrations for centuries. Let's be brutally honest about the economics. Commercial yeast costs approximately $3 per packet. Assuming 6 packets per year for 50 years of baking, that's $900 minimum, not accounting for inflation or special varieties. A sourdough starter costs approximately $2 in flour and water to create, then pennies per week to maintain indefinitely. The nutritional and digestive benefits are equally striking. Commercial bread typically contains 20 plus ingredients, many unpronounceable. Sourdough requires 4: flour, water, salt, and starter. The fermentation process pre-digests gluten, increases mineral availability, and creates naturally occurring preservative compounds. The time investment is minimal compared to store trips. 5 minutes of daily maintenance versus repeated purchases, expired products, and last-minute store runs when you run out. Perhaps most valuable is the independence factor. During shortages, emergencies, or supply chain disruptions, sourdough bakers maintain complete bread-making capability. No dependency on stores, shipping, or commercial products. In the interest of complete transparency, sourdough does have limitations. The fermentation process takes longer than commercial yeast, typically 6 to 8 hours versus 2 to 3 hours for complete bread. This requires planning ahead rather than spontaneous baking. There is a learning curve. Your first loaves may be denser or less predictable than commercial yeast bread. Traditional techniques require practice and observation rather than foolproof formulas. Maintenance demands consistency. While not time-consuming, daily feeding or proper storage is necessary to keep the culture alive. Neglected starters can be revived, but regular attention produces best results. The flavor profile differs from commercial bread. Traditional sourdough has a distinctly tangy taste that some palates need time to appreciate after years of bland commercial bread. Climate affects fermentation timing. Warmer environments speed the process. Cooler ones slow it. This requires adjustment and observation rather than following exact timelines. What you've learned today isn't just a recipe, it's the reclamation of knowledge that Big Food spent billions erasing. Subscribe and share to preserve what they tried to take from us. Every person who learns this technique is one less customer for the yeast industry. You're not just making bread, you're continuing an unbroken chain connecting you directly to medieval bakers. The culture on your counter is their living legacy. The next vault reveals the fermentation technique that preserves meat for years without refrigeration, another capability stripped from our collective knowledge by the food industry. The complete medieval food preservation vault is waiting in the description. Claim your independence from systems designed for your dependency. Some call it bread. I call it freedom.